My daughter shouted at me in front of everyone, her voice sharp enough to slice through the room. "You either apologize to my mother-in-law right now," she said, "or you can leave this house forever." Every guest fell silent. I felt their eyes burn into me, waiting for me to cry, to beg, to collapse under the shame. But instead, I slowly stood up from the chair they had placed for me at the very back of the room, far from the family table. I straightened my back and walked calmly toward the woman who had hated me from the moment we met. Her name was Veronica Hale, a woman with perfect hair, thin lips, and eyes that carried no warmth. She stood there with a smug smile, convinced I would kneel before her. But I didn't. I looked straight into her eyes and spoke one quiet sentence. The room froze. What followed destroyed the illusion of the perfect family everyone believed in. My name is Elena Morales. I am 70 years old. And this is how I was erased from my own daughter's life. 3 weeks earlier, I had been standing alone in my tiny kitchen, stirring a pot of vegetable soup, when I glanced at the calendar. That day was my youngest granddaughter's birthday. Isabella was turning 7.
They went straight to the drawer where I keep my papers. She won't understand any of this, Courtney murmured. She barely remembers to lock the door. Not Mom. Not Mother. Just she. Daniel's voice stayed calm. We'll have her sign the new forms tomorrow. She never reads them. Once the house is in both our names, the rest is easy. They laughed softly, the kind of laugh people use when they believe no one is listening. Imagine if she knew how much she actually has, Courtney said. She's sitting here eating soup while half of this could buy us another home. Their shadows crossed the carpet. They never once looked at me. She's lived long enough, Courtney added. She won't need it much longer. That sentence cut deeper than all the rest. They spoke about my life like a business transaction. About my future like a deadline. About my death like a scheduled event. When they finally left, the house felt different. Not quiet. Awake. I opened my eyes in the dark. My hand tightened around the recorder. For the first time in years, I didn't feel fragile. I felt clear. And clarity, I would soon learn, is more dangerous than anger. Morning does not whisper. It does not creep or hide behind shadows. It stands openly, honest and unforgiving, asking you to face what you already know. When I woke, my neck ached from sleeping in the armchair. My body felt stiff, but my mind was sharp. There was a heaviness inside me, not sorrow, not fear, something colder. Recognition. I folded the quilt the way I always do, smoothing the corners, as if routine might steady me. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. They tremble when I button a blouse or read fine print, but not now. Not after hearing my own children plan my disappearance. The kitchen felt smaller than usual. The kettle whistled as steam filled the air, warming my face. My house has always been modest, but in the early light it looked fragile, as if it too had heard the voices creeping across the carpet in the dark. My husband once said a home absorbs everything: love, grief, secrets, hope. I suppose betrayal settles into the walls as well. I sat at the oak table and let my thoughts move freely. They did not wander. They dissected. Every word from the night before replayed with surgical clarity.
The whisper in the hallway last night had not been the beginning. It had been the final word in a plan that had been unfolding far longer than I realized. I folded the documents back into the envelope. My hands were steady now. Shock had faded. Fear would come later if it wanted. For now, I had clarity. I sat there for a moment, just breathing, feeling the weight of it all. This wasn't just money. It was my independence, my choices, my voice. They had tried to erase me quietly, carefully. But I wasn't going to vanish. The morning light crept through the thin curtains. I rose and packed a small bag with essentials. I didn't know where I was heading yet, but I knew the first step had to be taken. The bank would come next. I had to see the truth laid bare in the light of accountability, to face the reality that the life I thought I had built for myself was no longer mine to command. I didn't want revenge. I wanted control. I wanted my name back.
The wedding should have been the happiest day of my daughter's life. It should have been a moment we shared, side by side, as mother and daughter. Instead, it became the first time I truly felt invisible. Rachel's wedding was held in a grand hall, filled with crystal lights, expensive flowers, and guests dressed in luxury. I later heard people whisper that the event had cost more than I earned in years. I was there, but not where a mother should be. They placed me at a table near the kitchen, far from the bride and groom. I sat beside strangers while the main table sparkled with Daniel's family. His mother, Veronica, sat at the center like royalty, surrounded by important relatives. Rachel came to my table only once that night. She kissed my cheek quickly and said, "Thanks for coming, Mom." As if I were just another guest. As if I hadn't worked double shifts for years to pay for her school. As if I hadn't sold the only gold ring I owned to help her buy her first car. As if I hadn't built my entire life around giving her a future. But I stayed silent. I smiled when the camera pointed at me. I clapped when they danced. And when the night ended, I took the bus home alone while they left in a white limousine for their luxury hotel. Not long after, my first grandson Lucas was born. When Rachel called me from the hospital, I cried with joy. I took a taxi, something I almost never do, just to see him. He was tiny, perfect, and warm in my arms. For a moment, I believed everything would be different. But when Daniel and Veronica arrived with a massive bouquet of white roses, her expression changed. She didn't say anything, but her eyes spoke clearly. I was in the way. I stood up, kissed Rachel's forehead, and left quietly. No one asked me to stay. Over time, my visits became shorter. Every 2 weeks turned into once a month. Once a month became every few months. Then only on special occasions. And finally, only when I begged. There was always an excuse. Daniel has a meeting. My mother-in-law is coming. The kids are busy. Each excuse was another door closing. The last time I asked for help was when I had to move apartments. The building was being demolished, and I was overwhelmed. I messaged Rachel, asking if she could come for just a few hours. 2 days later, she replied. "I can't, Mom. But I can send you money." She sent cash instead of herself. I hired strangers to help me move. And while I unpacked alone, I saw photos of Lucas's soccer game, Rachel, Daniel, and Veronica all together, cheering in the front row. A perfect family. With no space for me.
The lawyer's office smelled faintly of polished wood and lavender. The receptionist led me down a quiet hallway to a small room lined with bookshelves. Miss Clark, a woman in her early 40s with sharp gray eyes, extended her hand. "Mrs. Taylor," she asked. "Aaron said you might need help." I handed her the envelope. She flipped through each page carefully, lips pressed together. When she looked up, her gaze met mine fully. "I'm so sorry. This happens far too often, especially to older adults who trust too easily." I shook my head. I wasn't naive. I was hopeful. "That's different," she said softly. "And it makes you stronger." We sat for hours. She explained the legal implications of the forged power of attorney, the transfers, and the assisted living applications that had been drafted without my consent. Words like fraud, elder abuse, financial exploitation were thrown into the air, but they no longer scared me. They named what had been done. They gave it shape.
Not mom. Not grandma. Just a name. I took one fast photo. Isabella smiled, but her eyes kept searching for her other grandmother. I handed her the dress. She accepted it politely, then passed it to her mother without even opening it. Then everyone left for the reception in 3 cars. No one offered me a ride. Mom, the cars are full, Rachel said without meeting my eyes. You can take a cab. I'll pay you back. She never did. I went home alone. That night, I cried harder than I had since my husband passed away. Not only for the family I was losing, but for the daughter I no longer recognized. Everything finally made sense. This wasn't coincidence. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was a quiet, careful plan to remove me. And I knew who had designed it. Veronica. She saw everything in me that she hated, my simple clothes, my small home, my working hands, my life without money or power. To her, I didn't belong in her perfect family. And Rachel, my own daughter, had chosen her side. She chose comfort. She chose status. She chose a world where I no longer fit. One quiet Sunday morning, I accepted it. I sat by the window, coffee growing cold in my hands, and stopped making excuses. My daughter had erased me. Not by accident. But by choice. And in that moment, I decided I would stop begging for a place in a life that no longer wanted me.
Daniel came the next afternoon without calling. He entered the way people do when they believe they own the space, brisk, confident, already speaking before he reached the room. Helen, he called. Mom, you up? The word mom sounded different now. Too familiar for a man who had spent the night dividing my life like property. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting mail I had already read twice. When he walked in, he studied my face, searching for weakness the way one might inspect cracked porcelain. You look tired, he said. Rough night? I slept as I always do. He sat without waiting for an invitation and placed a thick envelope on the table. White. Official. Heavy with intention. We need to go over some papers, he said gently. Just routine updates. Routine. That word again. I folded my hands to keep them steady. What kind of updates? He smiled, dismissive. Nothing you need to worry about. It's to make things smoother for you. I like details, I said calmly. They help me understand what I'm signing. The smile faltered. Just enough.
Two weeks later, something happened that shattered my calm. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was watering the plants on my small balcony when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, a tall man in his 50s stood there, holding a manila envelope. Are you Elena Morales? He asked. Yes, I replied, my heart racing. My name is Rafael Cruz, he said quietly. I'm a private investigator. I need to talk to you about your son-in-law, and about the Hale family. The world seemed to stop. I invited him inside. We sat across from each other in my small living room. He placed the envelope on the table. 3 months ago, I was hired to investigate a businessman suspected of illegal activity, he said. That investigation uncovered a money laundering operation. He paused. Daniel is involved. And Veronica is running it. I felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath me. Raphael opened the envelope. Inside were documents, photographs, bank records, things I didn't fully understand but that looked very real. "Why are you telling me?" I whispered. "Because you're the only one not under Veronica's control," he said. "And the only one who can act without her suspecting." Suddenly, everything made sense. The exclusion. The lies. The distance. It wasn't just cruelty. It was protection, for them. And silence, from me. I stared at the envelope, realizing my daughter's perfect life was built on something dark. And now, the truth was in my hands. After Raphael left, I remained seated in silence, staring at the envelope as if it might explode. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. Everything I thought I knew about my daughter's life was unraveling. Slowly, I opened the folder. Inside were copies of property records, bank transfers, company names, and photographs. I didn't understand every detail, but one thing was clear: money was moving in strange ways. Large amounts passed between businesses that didn't seem to exist. Some properties were bought and resold within weeks, always connected to companies with the same addresses. And then I saw something that made my heart stop. The deed to Rachel's house. The date was wrong. According to the papers, the house had been purchased years earlier than Rachel had told me. And the money hadn't come from a bank loan. It had come from a company called Hale Holdings, a name Raphael had underlined in red. My daughter was living in a house bought with dirty money. Did she know? Or had they hidden it from her too? That night, I barely slept. I paced my apartment, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Rachel about money, about Daniel's investments, about Veronica's financial advice. All the pieces were finally fitting together. The next morning, I called Raphael. "I need to know everything," I said. "Every detail." There was a pause on the line. "Once you know, you can't forget," he warned. "I already can't," I replied. We met that afternoon at his office, a small room filled with files and the smell of coffee. He showed me more documents, more proof, more photographs. Veronica had been building the operation for over 15 years. Daniel joined after marrying my daughter. They bought properties using shell companies, moved money through fake sales, and cleaned it through legitimate businesses. Rachel, he believed, knew nothing. She was the perfect cover, a happy wife, devoted mother, flawless image. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Raphael leaned forward. "You need physical proof. Something the authorities can't ignore." "How?" "You have access," he said quietly. "You're the grandmother. You can enter the house." The idea made me feel sick. Sneaking into my daughter's home, searching through her husband's things, it felt like betrayal. But doing nothing felt worse. Raphael gave me a small USB drive with digital copies and a handwritten list of documents to look for. "Be careful," he said. "If Veronica finds out, it could be dangerous." I left his office with my heart pounding. That evening, I stared at Rachel's name in my phone. After weeks of silence, I finally called her. She sounded surprised to hear my voice. "I'd like to see the kids," I said softly. "Just for a little while." There was a long pause. Finally, she agreed. 2 days from now. I had 2 days to prepare, and to decide if I was brave enough to uncover the truth that could destroy everything. The morning of my visit, I dressed carefully. Not too formal. Not too plain. I wanted to look like the harmless grandmother they had already forgotten, not someone carrying secrets. Rachel opened the door with a nervous smile. "Mom," she said, as if unsure whether to hug me. I stepped inside, and the smell of fresh coffee and expensive candles filled the air. Everything was perfect: spotless floors, shining windows, framed family photos on the walls. A life built on lies. The children ran to me, hugging my legs. For a moment, I almost forgot why I was there. But then I saw Veronica's purse resting on the kitchen counter, large, designer, unlocked. My heart raced. Rachel busied herself in the kitchen, offering me tea. Daniel was upstairs, on a work call. I remembered Raphael's list. Office. Bedroom. Filing cabinet. When Rachel turned away to answer a phone call, I slowly walked down the hallway. The door to Daniel's office was half open.
Lucas, my grandson, came to see me occasionally, unprompted and unguarded. He didn't come with a message. He came with himself, and that made all the difference. The connection, fragile at first, grew in honesty. And I let it because it was real. At night, I sat by the window in my apartment, listening to the waves, the gulls, the soft hum of life outside. My suitcase was unpacked. My papers were secure. My boundaries were solid. I had reclaimed not just my possessions, but my name, my voice, my freedom. I wasn't afraid of silence anymore. I wasn't waiting for a call, a letter, or an apology that would never come. I had learned that leaving does not mean vanishing. It means choosing yourself, even when the world expects obedience. I am here. I am seen. I am whole. And if you are reading this, and you recognize the weight of a locked drawer, a forged signature, or the quiet pressure to disappear, know this: you are not too old to walk away. You are not too small to be heard. The door you leave through can remain open for yourself and, sometimes, for those who truly belong.
They came together the next afternoon. Daniel arrived first, his jaw tight, his shoulders squared as if preparing for a negotiation. Courtney followed, arms crossed, eyes guarded. I saw their silhouettes through the frosted glass before they knocked. People who believe something already belongs to them always stand that way. I opened the door before they rang again. "We need to talk," Daniel said. They went straight to the kitchen, their chosen courtroom, and sat without waiting to be invited. "You've been secretive," Courtney said. "Changing accounts. Refusing to sign. This isn't like you." "The bank called me," Daniel added. "The bank should not have called you," I replied quietly. That startled him. A small crack in his confidence. Daniel pushed a thin folder toward me. "We think it's time you let us manage things." I slid it back. "I won't be signing anything." Courtney gasped. Daniel stood, frustrated. "You're being unreasonable." "No," I said. "I'm being aware." I walked to the sideboard and took out the recorder. Their faces changed instantly. I pressed play. Their whispers filled the room. Their laughter. Their plans. Their certainty that I was too old to notice. When it ended,
Raphael warned me that Veronica was trying to find the leak. He told me to stay calm and let him handle the authorities. But I was tired of being afraid. When Rachel invited me to dinner that weekend, I knew something was wrong. Still, I went. Veronica was there. She greeted me with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We should talk," she said. The air felt heavy. Daniel avoided my gaze. Rachel looked nervous. They accused me, gently, but firmly. I denied everything. Then Veronica leaned forward and whispered, "You don't belong in this family." The words burned. But I didn't break. Because this time, I had the truth. And soon, so would everyone else. The tension had been building for weeks. Every glance from Veronica, every quiet word from Rachel, every calculated smile from Daniel felt like a countdown to something inevitable. And I knew the moment had come. I met Raphael early in the morning. He handed me a small camera and a second USB drive. "This is your last chance," he said. "Once you make this public, there's no going back. You have proof. And if you play it smart, it'll end this nightmare." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and resolve. My daughter and grandchildren were still my reason for everything, even after the pain and betrayal. That evening, I returned to Rachel's house, ostensibly for dinner with the children. Everything appeared normal. The kids ran to greet me. Rachel smiled politely. Daniel was busy on his laptop. Veronica lingered in the kitchen, pretending to prepare a snack. I waited until the children ran upstairs, following their usual routine. Then I calmly sat across from Rachel. "Mom," she said nervously, "I need to talk to you." I looked at her, keeping my voice steady. "I think it's time everyone knows the truth." Before she could respond, I placed the USB drive on the table and turned on the camera I had hidden earlier. I told her I had evidence of Daniel and Veronica's activities, money laundering, fake property deals, and all the secrets Raphael had uncovered. Rachel's eyes widened. She tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "I know you didn't know everything," I said gently. "But I can't stand by while they continue to manipulate and steal from everyone around them." At that moment, Veronica entered the room, her smile now gone. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice cold. "I'm showing the truth," I replied calmly. "You've spent years hiding behind lies, and it ends tonight." Veronica's jaw tightened. Daniel looked like a cornered animal, unsure of where to turn. Rachel trembled, torn between disbelief and relief. I pressed play on the camera. Photos, documents, and recordings appeared on the screen. The evidence was undeniable. Every fake invoice, every shell company, every suspicious bank transfer, it was all there. Veronica's expression faltered. Daniel tried to reach for the camera, but I moved it away just out of reach. The room was silent except for the images flickering across the screen. Rachel's face went pale. Her hands shook as she realized the life she had trusted was built on deception. And for the first time, she looked at me not as an outsider, but as her mother, the only person who had tried to protect her. I leaned forward and said softly, but firmly, "This ends now. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more hiding." For the first time in years, I felt the weight in my chest lighten. I had done what was necessary. The truth was finally out. The house was quiet after the confrontation, but it wasn't peaceful. Rachel sat on the sofa, her face pale, eyes red from crying. Daniel and Veronica had retreated to a corner, their expressions unreadable, caught between anger and fear. For the first time, the masks were gone. I sat beside Rachel and took her hands in mine. "You didn't know," I said gently. "I know. But now you have a choice, to rebuild, or to let this destroy you." She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Mom. I don't know how to fix this. Everything I thought I had, it was all a lie." I hugged her tightly. "Then we start over. Step by step. One truth at a time." Outside, the sound of sirens began to echo through the neighborhood. Raphael had contacted the authorities. With the USB drive and the documents I had collected, law enforcement now had enough evidence to intervene. Daniel and Veronica would be held accountable for their actions, and the children would be safe. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of relief. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was the first sign that justice might reach the people I loved. That night, I watched Rachel sit quietly with Lucas and Isabella, explaining in simple words what had happened. The children listened with confusion, fear, and trust in their mother's voice. I stayed nearby, offering support, ready to answer questions, to provide comfort. I had missed so much of their lives, but now I could be here, fully, without deception or barriers. Days later, Rachel and the children moved into my apartment. It wasn't large. It wasn't luxurious. But it was safe. honest. A place to heal. Slowly, the trauma began to ease. Mateo, once sullen and withdrawn, started to smile again. Isabella laughed while drawing at the table. Rachel, though exhausted, looked more like the daughter I had known, not the controlled figure Veronica had molded her into, but her true self. The house that had been built with deceit, money, and manipulation was seized by the authorities. Expensive furniture, designer clothes, and other ill-gotten possessions were removed. Rachel had only what she truly needed: her children, a few cherished items, and the support of a mother who had refused to be erased. I reflected on the long journey, the betrayal, the silence, the fear, the planning, and finally, the courage to act. It hadn't been easy. I had risked everything. But the truth had been worth it. As I prepared dinner one evening, watching Lucas and Isabella giggle over homework, I felt a calm settle over me. Life wouldn't be perfect. There would still be challenges, moments of sadness and anger. But this time, we faced them with honesty, with love, and with each other. And that, after all the years of being silenced and hidden, felt like victory. 3 weeks after the authorities intervened, Rachel and the children had moved completely into my apartment. The space was modest, but it felt alive for the first time in years. Every morning, I watched Lucas and Isabella run around, laughing without fear or pretense, and I felt a calm that had been absent for far too long. The house that had been filled with lies, greed, and manipulation was no more. Daniel and Veronica were being prosecuted. Their properties seized, their wealth frozen, and their plans dismantled. Justice was finally catching up with them, and our family was safe. Rachel spent long nights sorting through the remnants of the life they had lost. Clothes, toys, and personal items were organized carefully for the children. She spoke softly with Lucas and Isabella about responsibility, honesty, and the consequences of choices. What happened is not your fault, she reassured them. But we will learn from it and move forward together. For the first time, I saw my daughter truly breathe, freed from Veronica's manipulations. The tension that had defined her posture for years, the careful politeness, the hidden anxieties, slowly began to vanish. She was becoming herself again, the Rachel I remembered from her childhood, bright, thoughtful, and resilient. I joined her in these small rituals of restoration, cooking their favorite meals, reading bedtime stories, and simply being present. Each smile from Lucas and Isabella, each quiet moment of shared laughter, felt like a small victory, a sign that life, though altered, could still be beautiful.